We've seen some of the top free agents in 2025 sign contract extensions a year early this offseason. We saw Lauri Markkanen re-sign with the Utah Jazz. We just recently saw Jamal Murray re-sign with the Denver Nuggets. And there's one free agent in 2025 that has a $52.5 million player option that is not going to sign an extension before this season starts, is Jimmy Butler of the Miami Heat. And there's been a lot of talks that this could be Jimmy Butler's last year as a Heat, given that both sides between the Miami Heat's front office and Jimmy Butler are not on the same page when it comes to a contract extension. Back in June, it was pretty much well known that Jimmy Butler wanted a max extension from the Miami Heat and felt like it was well deserving since he brought them to the NBA Finals in 2020 and in 2023. And then in an end of the season interview, Pat Riley, the main man in charge of the Miami Heat, implied that a contract extension won't happen due to Jimmy Butler's lack of availability in recent seasons, and that would take a role in the team's decision-making process on whether to even offer a new deal to the superstar wing. This was reported by Shams of The Athletic, so it was well known out there and well reported that these two sides were not on the same page, and with Jimmy Butler having a chance to be a free agent in the 2025 offseason is going to make this year very interesting. Now, the Warriors tried getting involved in adding Jimmy Butler to them, and that really didn't work out. Jimmy Butler said that he wants to play out this existing contract and most likely wants to be a free agent next year. And for the Miami Heat, this could get really interesting on where their season is going to go. Because this offseason, teams around the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference got better. The Sixers added Paul George, the Knicks added Mikal Bridges, the Orlando Magic and the Indiana Pacers kept their depth and they're still insanely young. The Cleveland Cavaliers are running it back. The Boston Celtics are still going to be at the top of the East. And I haven't even mentioned the Milwaukee Bucks, who are bound to be better next year after a letdown 2024 season. And that leaves the Miami Heat, who did get healthy this offseason. Terry Rozier was banged up after they traded for him last year. Tyler Hero was banged up last year. Jimmy Butler was obviously banged up. Pat Riley said that their big offseason acquisition came at last year's trade deadline in Terry Rozier, and they drafted a backup in Khalil Ware. The Miami Heat lost Caleb Martin, one of their better role players, to the Philadelphia 76ers this offseason and kind of took less money, which was a really interesting development. Brought in Pele Larson from Arizona in the second round, and they signed undrafted free agent Keyshawn Johnson, also from Arizona. They brought in Josh Christopher, they brought in Alec Burks, they got Bam Adebayo on a contract extension, they re-signed Hayward Highsmith. This team on paper, while it could be exciting next year, is still not in the tier 1 of Eastern Conference teams. You have a projected starting lineup of Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jovic, and Bam Adebayo, and then you have Jaime Jaquez as the main man off the bench. But can this team withstand injuries? Last year, Jimmy Butler appeared in 60 out of 82 games. He averaged 21 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists, and looked really solid in their playing tournament loss against the 76ers, but got hurt and was out all round 1 against the Boston Celtics, which kind of exposed Tyler Hero as a main scoring option for the Miami Heat. And there was a recent report that the Brooklyn Nets could be interested in Jimmy Butler next offseason. They can have a max slot available, but they're a team that is just starting off their long rebuild, right? They just traded away Mikal Bridges this offseason. I'm sure when teams are calling, they will move Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, or Dennis Schroeder, or any veteran that can net them some draft capital in return. And they want to see what they can get out of their younger guys like Noah Clowney, Derek Whitehead, Jalen Wilson, and Nick Claxton, as well as their main young guy, Cam Thomas. So even if the Brooklyn Nets added Jimmy Butler next offseason and somehow ended up with the number 1 overall pick to take Cooper Flagg, I don't think that they're a playoff team immediately. They would need a lot to go their way. So there will be teams that will be interested in Jimmy Butler next year. I mentioned them before, but the Golden State Warriors are going to be interested all year in pairing up Jimmy Butler with Steph Curry. Could the LA Clippers, who can create cap space next offseason, look to bring Jimmy Butler to replace Paul George a year later? Could the Lakers get involved and try to get a third star? Sign and trades can happen, and if Jimmy Butler expresses to Miami that he wants out, they will have to move him because he could leave for nothing, or there could be an orchestrated sign and trade, which at least nets Miami back something instead of losing Jimmy Butler for nothing. If you're Miami, you want to keep Jimmy Butler around. He just turned 35 years old. Yes, he's getting up there in age, but if you can get done a 3-year deal, I would do it. He led you guys to the NBA Finals in 2020, having a great playoff performance in the bubble. We're in the finals against the Lakers, although they did lose in 6 games. He averaged 26 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists in that series, and shot 55% from the field. It wasn't pretty in 2021 against Milwaukee, but in 2022, they beat the Hawks in 5 in round number 1, in a series in which Jimmy Butler averaged 30 points across 5 games. In round number 2 against Philadelphia, they won in 6, where he averaged 27.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists, and then they lost to the Boston Celtics in 7 games as the inferior team and gave Boston a run for their money, in which Jimmy Butler averaged 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. And then we all know what he did in the 2023 playoffs, pulling off one of the greater upsets of the 21st century in the playoffs as an 8 seed, beating the 1-seeded Bucks, who a lot of people thought were going to win the finals in 2023. Jimmy had one of the greatest player performances of all time, averaging 37.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists in that series, and shot 60% from the field and 44% from 3. Now, we did get injured against the Knicks, which diminished his play a little bit in round 2, and then again in round 3 against Boston, but they beat them, right? They beat the Knicks in round 2, beat Boston in round 3, and they did lose to the Nuggets in the NBA Finals, but they were an 8 seed. Jimmy Butler carried that team throughout the playoffs. Now, Bam Adebayo is a good number 2 option, and he could win Defensive Player of the Year this year. He's one of the best defenders in this league, but if Jimmy Butler is not on this team next year, Bam, Tower Hero, Jaime Jaquez definitely has a ceiling on it as a squad. So Miami is in a very interesting position throughout this season to keep Jimmy Butler happy and make sure this doesn't go south real quick. Now, if Miami is healthy, I don't think I want to play them in the playoffs, right? I think they could beat Orlando or Indiana or basically every team outside of Boston in a 7-game playoff series if they're healthy, from what we've seen of Jimmy Butler and this Heat team in the past, right? The Heat culture, the grit and grind, underdog mentality that we've seen since Butler signed with the Miami Heat back in 2019 when that was an orchestrated sign and trade from Philadelphia to Miami. So this team could still make a run in the playoffs, and if they make a run, right? If they make it to round 2, round 3, this can change everything. And the Miami Heat have to re-sign Jimmy Butler. They would have no other option. But with NBA free agency kind of dying over the last couple of years and bigger name players signing extensions and then eventually end up getting traded, it's going to be cool if a big name like Jimmy Butler hits the free agency market again. We did see Paul George switch teams this offseason, and Jimmy Butler could be a similar caliber player leaving next offseason as well. And the Miami Heat wouldn't want to take a step back either. Their 2025 first round pick is lottery protected to the Oklahoma City Thunder. That could be unprotected as well in 2026, so that could determine if they're going to have their first round pick next year. And then in 2027, their pick is lottery protected to the Charlotte Hornets from the Terry Rozier trade, and if they're in the lottery in 2027, that pick becomes unprotected in 2028. So the Heat do not have all their draft picks that they can move this offseason if they needed to make a corresponding move to convince Jimmy to stay, or have to go to plan B if Jimmy does leave in free agency. But the Miami Heat are a premier free agency destination in the NBA. They have signed high valued free agents over the last decade plus, right? They signed LeBron James and Chris Bosh in free agency. They brought in Jimmy Butler in 2019 in a sign and trade when nobody expected that they were going to be able to be a Jimmy Butler suitor. Now, if Jimmy does leave, they do have to pay Bam Adebayo $51 million in the coming years. Tyler Hero is still on a big contract. Duncan Robinson's going to make about $20 million in 2026, but the Heat aren't going to have too much wiggle room, but we've said that in the past, and they've been able to work around that with Pat Riley being the orchestrator that he has been in the past. But is he past his prime? We have to see that as a front office, because the Heat have gotten just so close, man, and I just would hate to see Jimmy Butler leave. I think it is cool nowadays where we actually see some continuity and chemistry between star players and their teams, and we kind of went through a phase where guys were getting traded left and right, and while that is fun, at the end of the day, I want to remember these players for one specific team. That's what makes Steph Curry on the Warriors legendary. And obviously Jimmy Butler played with teams in the past. You're not really going to remember him too much in Philadelphia and Minnesota. When it's all said and done, you're going to remember his early days in Chicago and hopefully his later days in Miami. So that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this Jimmy Butler Miami Heat saga from this offseason? Do you think he's going to be a Miami Heat after this year? Do you think they should re-sign him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.